How's it going, everyone? In today's video we're going to be revisiting artist Chris Stussy. This time round we're looking specifically at a cool technique he's using to write those sick melodies we've all come to love. The idea for this one came to me while I was listening to his recent Boiler Room set, where a lot of the tracks he was playing had this rather unique feel about them. In this one we'll be using an unreleased Stussy inspired Gaskin tune to help us uncover what truly makes his melodies so unique. Let's get into it. Before we dive into the technique and how you can actually go about replicating some of the stuff Stussy does, what I'm going to start off by doing is basically talking about the popular approach that most of us will probably do when it comes to melodies. I think the most common way that most of us will do is have somewhere between 2 to 3 more developed melodic layers, but something I can hear in many of Stussy's tracks is basically one melodic idea but spreading that melodic layer across loads of different sounds. The example that comes to mind of this is Stussy's track All Night Long. What I want you to listen out for here is basically all the different melodic layers that come in and out. So from the sound of things, he's got that kind of main bass. Then he's got different kind of synth fills, he's got a few vocal fills that come in and out, and it's basically a more interesting way of doing your melodies than just picking 1 or 2 melodic phrases and having them play throughout. I find that this mixed melody approach tends to lend itself to nicer grooves. It also kind of adds this unpredictability about it, because you never know what's coming in. You're constantly hearing new elements. Having heard that example, you might be sitting here thinking that the technique kind of sounds familiar, and you're probably right in your thinking, because it's a technique that is used across quite a lot of different genres. You might hear it in genres like garage with mixed bass lines. You might hear it in minimal house with the kind of synth chords, similar to how we demonstrated in our minimal house like the pros tutorial. So the premise of the technique is essentially splitting your patterns up into loads of different melodic layers, but I think the way Stussy's using it is a bit more advanced, as he kind of tends to have all these melodic ideas talking to each other across synths, bass, vocals, and even his effects, helping to add this really unique feel to that kind of overall groove of the track. In this section we're going to look at how the mixed melody technique works. How I normally start is actually with the full pattern, just because it's kind of easier to do the full thing and strip it down as opposed to working the opposite way. So what I essentially do is I start off by choosing a few sounds and kind of making these become the main layer. The kind of main layer for this track is this 5th bass and this main chord. I've talked about those 5th synth patches loads, so we're just keeping with that theme today. And then what I do is I start putting in a melody. So what I'll do here is I'll just unmute all the notes and I'll play the melody. So the 5th bass would be the first patch I chose for this, and then the 5th chord would be another. So I think this was the full pattern. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm starting with that sound, getting the main pattern down. Then what I'm doing is I'm kind of selectively muting notes. I've kind of cut it up for visual aids, so you can essentially see where certain instruments come in. The only time those patterns play in full is for that build, but if I line them up, what you'll see is the way I've muted them, they're kind of playing question and answer type phrases. So I was talking about the kind of popular way to do melodies, which would normally be to have like one or two more developed phrases and just have them constantly playing. But here what you're doing is you're essentially taking more care in terms of the placement and letting your track breathe a little bit more. Once you've kind of got the main layers down, the next place you can kind of go is to add some new sounds and basically just see how far you can take that basic pattern from above. So I think where I may have ended up next was these kind of textures. We'll just play the group. So I'm basically adding a lot of counter melodies, but I'm also taking care that the kind of main melodies still shine through. So that's kind of roughly how the mixed melody technique would work and how I'd approach it to begin with. This is literally just the bass group, but if I quickly show this, what I've got is a bunch of chords, a bunch of leads, which is playing a nice kind of melodic layer there. We've got this lead fill. I've got these kind of arps as well. A lot of it is just pure experimentation with the sounds and the placement of the patterns, but you can just see the kind of effect it's having, and I think it's just something that Stussy is doing so well. So what I'm kind of talking about now is essentially the basic beginning to this technique, where you're essentially relying on basic patterns and the relationship between them to create a really nice groove. So in pretty much every space, there's something going on melodically, whether it be a bass, whether it be a synth chord, whether it be a lead, just something that's going to keep that melodic interest up. So we've talked a bit about how this mixed melody technique works and kind of how you'd start that process, but it doesn't actually stop with just the synths and the bass. So what we've done here is we've used a combination of vocal ad-libs and SFX, which I'll just play. So we've got different kind of vocal ad-libs, basically just filling in the gaps. When I play it all together, you'll hear like how much of a difference it makes. Then we've just got vocal ad-libs as well, which is another way to kind of continue building that melodic groove. So for this one, we've got this ad-lib, we've got this random one, we've got this kind of California Love 2-pack a cappella, which that unreleased reference kind of reminded me of a bit. What I could also do is kind of add ad-libs. We could just kind of jam out and see what happens here. Essentially, this mixed melody technique is based on incredibly simple melodies and just finding loads of really complementary sounds to kind of build a groove around. Obviously, you can start with those more advanced patterns and strip them down first to give you kind of a core melodic foundation, but you'll also find that the further you get in that kind of melodic process, the easier it is just to lay down really simple ideas. So the majority of this video has been spent looking at kind of those very basic patterns, but that's not to say that you should just keep your melodies incredibly basic. The kind of way I approach that technique is normally to start with that kind of core melody and then to start adding some more developed melodies. I've got a few layers in this track, mainly these kind of longer ones that haven't been chopped up, where I've just kept them in their full form. We've got this kind of analog bass. I basically just wrote in a pretty kind of funky pattern, and I basically just added this as almost a secondary main bass. I had a sub as well, which just helped to beef out the kind of low end. It's almost adding its own kind of subby kind of groove if I literally just played it with the kick. So we've got that kind of developed phrase. We've got this one further down. It's like this dubby kind of chord. And then the final layers we've got are leads, which are mostly developed. I found these kind of pretty nice textured patches, which I'm kind of a bit obsessed with at the moment. What I've essentially done is I've picked two patches which layer really nicely together. We've kind of got the same kind of pattern going on here, but you'll see there's some variance in the notes. Basically what I've done is I've duplicated the pattern, I've shortened some notes, and what I've also done is I've added extra notes just to add this kind of separation to the pattern. We've basically just got loads of different kind of synths coming in and out, just because I like to experiment with loads of patterns, and I feel like the more developed ideas really help to complement the basic ones and vice versa. So those are essentially the kind of more developed patterns, and I'd always recommend adding a few of those more complex melodic ideas just to really get the best out of this technique. So yeah guys, that's gonna be it for this one. I hope it gave you a bit of inspiration if it's those Stussy vibes you're after, or a new technique that you can go away and implement in your tracks. If you got any value from this, I'll ask that you leave it a like, subscribe for more Stussy influence videos, and let me know your thoughts down below. If you wish to carry on watching, I'll be leaving 2 recommendations on screen that I think you might enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one.